Brian Lara used pot plants to work on his placement. John Wright glued his glove to his bat. Sachin Tendulkar dug up practice pictures. Tatenda Taibu cut the top off his bat. Claire Taylor used a hockey grip. Steve Smith was from tennis. Dean Jones would call phantom runs. And Victor Trumper turned the nets into a war zone to survive. The best batters in the world do whatever they have to make runs. We have told their stories in our new book, The Art of Batting.
Hello, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Good Areas Live, and happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. I'm Behram Kazi, who you can find at Def Mango on Twitter, and I've got Jared Kimber with me, who you can find literally everywhere. And as you all know, Australia lost to South Africa in the World Test Championship final by 5 wickets, and today we are here to discuss all of their performances, I suppose. So, Jared, I suppose the best place to start would be, for me, the best performer of the game for Australia, which was Pat Cummins. 7 wickets in the game, 6 for 28 in his first dig. He removed Temba twice, and that's an accomplishment. Also crosses 300 test wickets in this final. And one really fun stat is that he becomes the first bowling captain since Bob Willis to make the honours board at Lord's since 1982. What could he have done differently, I suppose?
He bowled well. I'm not sure that he had to do anything differently, did he? Yeah. Look, I think the real question is kind of where is Australia in a similar position that India was at not that long ago, where they have to decide whether they want to keep rolling out the same players over and over again or make a bigger choice. And I suppose Pat Cummins is also part of that, right? Not that he's about to retire or give up the captaincy or anything like that, but as in he's going to have to make a decision of, I mean, they've been pissing about with the opening spot for how long now? Smith, Head, right? Constas comes in and they get rid of Constas. You know, McSweeney basically went up against Bumrah. Like, if they believe he's any good, then just bring him back. Like, let him face someone who's not Bumrah. So I think there's some big issues with all that at the moment. So yeah, from that perspective, I think that's where Cummins has the decisions. I mean, he bowled fine. He took 7 wickets in a test match. He hasn't done anything wrong with his bowling.
Also, he was exceptional with the short stuff in his first dig, and we've seen Pat Cummins use the bumper brilliantly throughout his career. It's really well directed to the rib cage and everything. Did conditions kind of screw him over, I suppose, because the ball didn't bounce as much in the 4th innings?
Yeah, I mean, even South Africa struggled, didn't they, with to bowl bounces in the 3rd innings. So by the 4th innings, there wasn't much there. I saw him and Stark both try it. It just didn't get up, right? Like there just wasn't that kind of bounce. If you know, Webster was maybe the best example of this because he's probably got as high a release point as Hazelwood and usually gets quite good bounce. And you know, the keeper was up at the stumps to Webster because they were like, it's not an issue here. We don't need to worry about it all that much.
Yeah. Anyway, since we've done one bowler, let's shift our focus to an opening batter, someone who only scored a solitary run in the game, and that was his run in the 3rd innings, whereas Usman Khawaja in the 1st innings had a 20-ball duck. Now, a lot of people were assuming that he might retire after this World Test Championship final, but from the news that I'm reading, it seems like Australia want Khawaja to continue till the end of the Ashes.
Yeah, well, Andrew McDonald said that, right? Andrew McDonald said there's no problem with him, with his position. He can have it till the end of the Ashes. Look, he's been in bad form for a while now outside of, was it the double 100 against Sri Lanka?
Yes.
He's really been struggling for quite a period of time in Test cricket. I don't think this is where it's very different to the India situation where India had other players coming through and I think they had the ability to, make a change. Whereas Australia don't have one opener. So finding 2 is going to be pretty tough, right? So I would assume that's why McDonald has said what he said at the moment, which is, hopefully they can get to a situation where he finds some kind of form. But yeah, I'm trying to have a look now. He scored, in his last 25 innings, he scored 3 scores over 50, right? Whereas the year before that, he played 24 innings and he scored 9 times over 50. Like, wow. We can get hung up on averages, and his average looks this year a little bit better because of the double 100. But he's had 7 innings this year, and he's only passed 50 once, right? Like, he's not the player he used to be at the moment. What Australia really need to decide is, and sounds like from McDonald, they're deciding that he's not finished, he's just going through a slump. you and I have talked about this before. He does slump, far more than
Yes.
most players do.
Hmm.
So
He's a
it's
cluster
probably
batter,
worth,
isn't he?
yeah. So it's probably worth them sticking with him a little bit until they at least have one opener that they can, that they know is going to play consistently. But I find it hard to believe that he's about to bounce back into form straight away.
I will say this though, that he had to face Prime Bumrah in Australia in the Border Gavaskar Trophy. Then he gets an easier challenge versus Sri Lanka, scores the double hundred, and now of course Kagiso Rabada with the new ball and testing conditions. It was tough work. It's not going to be as hard facing England on your own home turf when they've got a seam bowling attack, which is generally very, very new. So maybe it's not the
Yeah.
worst decision.
Uh, well, did he make runs against Pakistan in 23, 24?
I don't think he scored many runs versus Pakistan. No.
Didn't make runs versus West Indies to follow. Didn't make runs versus New Zealand to follow. It's not. I don't think this is about hard attacks. It might be about seam bowling rather than spin, and maybe that was a part of it. But yeah, I think there is definitely a chance of. I think I'll stick with him. He might not play the entire series though.
Yeah, fair. All right, moving on. There's another Australian batter who's been struggling for a bit. And Marnus Labuschagne was, in my opinion, kind of done dirty a bit as well when they experimented with him opening the batting with Usman Khawaja. And I mean, he's been struggling big time, but nothing really changed over here. He scored 17 and 22 off like a million deliveries. And barring a couple of, attractive cover drives, he looked really out of sorts. So where is his career at? Because McDonald wasn't really sure about him. It seems like Marnus might lose his spot in the team.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. Look, you say he's done dirty, but they also moved him because he hasn't been working, right? Like,
Yeah.
if he was just making lots of runs, I don't think they would have made that decision. I think he, if anything, I think he probably opened the batting because they didn't think Constas was ready, and obviously they don't want to go back to McSweeney yet. So when it comes to it, he's not made runs for quite a while. He's not been the consistent player he used to be. I would love to chat to him about it because I just kind of feel like he just needs a rest. And he just needs to go off and, I don't know if he surfs, but goes fishing, surfing, plays 10-pin bowling, whatever it may be, for a little while and just relax and come back. So much of his personality is around him being a batter. We're now into year 3 of the slump, right?
Yes.
I'd say it's probably a combination of technical and teams working him out. But also, I think he just needs to relax and then pick up a bat when he feels better about himself and then do that. And I don't know if that's a natural thing for Marnus, right? Like, we make jokes about Steve Smith, but Steve Smith is often goes on holiday in New York on his own, right? There's always like a random photo of Steve Smith in a bar in New York that somehow ends up as a Daily Mail article that no one really understands. But Steve Smith also has horse racing. It's funny. Robbie said the other day he has lots of interests. I'm not sure he has lots of interests, but he has interests, even if batting is his main one. Feels sometimes with Marnus he doesn't. And Jonathan Trott is probably a very good example of that. And Jonathan Trott went through a dip that kind of ruined the end of his career when probably what he needed was not to be dropped, right? I don't think there's any reason to drop players of that level. What you say is, go off and get yourself right. And when you're right and you think it's humming again, we'll bring you back in, right? The minute there's a spot available. It's not how we look at test 11s, sadly. And so because of that, it's like he's in the side, he's out the side. So you end up clinging on and then they're like, do you want to open? And you're like, yeah, of course I'll open. And it's like, yeah, you weren't making any runs at 3. Chances were, you weren't going to make any runs opening.
Well, I do think he has some technical deficiencies which people have worked out because South Africa have done their homework versus him in this test match, and Janssen gets him out twice, which is something that Cheyenne actually called out in his piece. And he also called out that battle between Rabada and Usman Khawaja. So really, really good week for Cheyenne, I suppose. But yeah, with Steve Smith's pinky mangled, you'd think that Marnus will probably get a few opportunities in the Caribbean, right?
He might, yeah. And again, you have to ask if that's the best thing for him at the moment. And, as I said, unless you chat to him and I didn't see him around or anything, but I would love to have chatted to him and just be like, what do you think it is? I actually think it's very similar to what happened to Virat Kohli, which is teams originally were just bowling very straight to him and he has no issue with that ball. And the minute they've gone wider, he just has an issue. How you overcome that while you're playing as much as he is, and he's playing county cricket and everything else, and he's a worker. Right, it's really hard for workers to not just take a step back, right? And sometimes that's what you have to do.
True. Another person who Australia really have to think about going into the future, who is going to be one of their mainstays for sure, is Cam Green. Of course, they experimented with him as well at first drop, got exposed versus KG Rabada. And I mean, he had never batted at 3 in his entire Test career. I think he's batted like once or twice at that number in first class cricket.
Once in
And he
first
got
class cricket, when they were chasing 85 runs in the second innings, and they changed the order.
and Manas got him out. I remember a commentator mentioning that as well, which was a really fun nugget. But Cam Green gets an unplayable delivery by Rabada in the first innings, and he scores, 4 and a duck. Now, what position do you bat him in? Because they experimented with him at number 4 because he was doing really well at number 4, and he's also done well in those sort of positions for Gloucester. So that's an issue. It's a good problem to have,
He's so with top order players. It's kind of not everyone can be a number 3 who can open. Sorry, I should say not everyone can be a number 4 who can bat number 3. Some people are number 4s who could also bat in 5 and 6, and then you have other players who are number 4s who probably need to bat number 3 and could even open, right? And he's definitely on the other side of that, right? He's definitely on the 4 or 5 situation. I don't see any reason why he couldn't bat 5, but I think they want Head to bat 5, so it's a little bit, they've got a similar issue to what England had a few years ago, where they've got a bunch of players who probably all want 1 or 2 of the same numbers. And so how do you fit them all into that lineup in that situation? I think, that's playing a big part in it. I think the issue is, and that there's no reason why Steve Smith can't bat at 3. They don't want him to bat at 3. And he might not want to bat at 3. It would have made more sense if he batted at 3 back when Marnus was struggling rather than going to open. The issue, though, as Varun will point out, is that at the moment, Smith is actually struggling when he's going in against a new ball. So if there's a buffer, he's really good. And if there's not, maybe he's back in form now and that doesn't matter as much. But realistically, it probably has to be Smith at 3, Green at 4, and Head at 5, right? Yeah. In the short term. But the only informed batter they really have is Smith. And you can understand why they don't want to change that, right? Like, you can absolutely understand why they don't really want to be going ahead and changing all that difference. So this is where it becomes a bit of an issue. They don't have an opener they can trust at the moment, right? So Khawaja's not quite trustworthy. He's not far off it, but he's certainly not trustworthy. McSweeney can't open. I should say they don't trust him. They don't trust Constas, as we've just seen in this last game. McDonald has come out and said that Marnus is not there either, right?
Yeah.
So they're in this awful situation where they have Inglis and Smith and Head and Green, who probably all want to bat at 4 or 5, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so, it's just not ideal. And I don't know what the ultimate answer is to some of that. I think that Green can bat at 6, and I think he's batted at 6 in first-class cricket quite a bit. So if Green can bowl again, maybe you move Webster out and have him in the squad, but don't need to automatically play him. And that stops some of those issues, but it doesn't stop everything I've just said, right?
Yeah, that's true. And of course, you mentioned Travis Head, who is a lock at 5 or so, it seems, in the short term. But then Travis Head is another one of those batters who falls cheaply in both innings of this big final, which was massive for South Africa. They first strangle him down the leg side. Janssen does that. And then, of course, Mulder cleans him up. Would you say, all things said and done, Head failing twice is the biggest blow that Australia dealt in this final?
No, not really. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, it's a one-off game. Anyone can fail in a one-off game. Like, I wouldn't be taking anyone's individual stats from a one-off game all that seriously. One of them, as you said, was a strangle down the leg side. That can happen to anyone. These things happen. So yeah, no, I wouldn't be massively worried about that at all. But he didn't make runs, and they probably needed one more player. Like, Smith looked really good in this game and didn't quite go on in the first innings when he probably should have. And he got caught up in that Ngidi spell when it was really dark, and Ngidi was nipping the ball around a little bit. So, if Smith had gone on to make another 50 or 60 runs in this game, again, they probably still win the game, right? Like, there are many different small things. So I'm not too worried about things like that.
Also, he doesn't get really good batting conditions either because he's introduced earlier onto the crease, in terms of like entry points. But anyway, that pretty much covers half of the team. We still got half of the players left. And before we go there, we will be taking a short break. You guys are watching Good Areas Live with Jared and Behram. So go nowhere. We will be back in like half a minute.
Tim Wigmore's Test Cricket, A History, is out now. The book tells the story of the players, matches and politics that have shaped the game around the world since 1877. It's the product of 5 years of research that includes interviews with Sachin Tendulkar, Pat Cummins, Michael Holding, Murali and Kane Williamson. Put Wigmore on your shelves today.
Welcome back to Good Areas Live. You guys are with Behram and Jared. And Jared, I want to talk about Mitch Starc because he's had a very, very interesting game, right? In the third innings, of course, he comes out to bat when Australia 73 for 7. And he's dropped on 14 by Janssen. Plays a streaky knock, but bats time, 136 deliveries and walks back unbeaten for 58. And that's just his batting, right? With the ball in the first innings, he gets both openers. So brilliant with the new ball in both innings, really, right? 2 for 41, should have had 3 because he had Mulder, which Carey dropped. He dropped a sitter. And then in the second innings, it's very interesting. He comes in and he removes Rickleton almost instantly. Then later on, he comes back for his second spell and gets rid of Wian Mulder. Again, he should have had Bavuma, but Smith drops him on 2. But he also, between those 2 wickets and that proper bail trimmer to dismiss Stubbs on day 4, he goes for plenty. They target him. And by the end of day 3, Starc's economy rate is 5.89. So it's been a mixed bag for him, isn't it? And he's another one of those players who really will have to think about his future in Test cricket.
It seems like he wants to play for a long time. I thought he bowled really well at times in this test and really poorly at other times. But yeah, it seems from everything he said, he just wants to keep playing. So, it'd be fascinating to see how much longer he actually does play for. It isn't like Australia's got 83 other left-arm seamers coming through that are going to take over from him automatically or anything like that. So you could see why he would play for a long time. I think he's bowled better of recent times than he has in a while, and I thought he was in really good rhythm in the first innings. I just thought he probably lost his rhythm throughout the game, which is a normal thing. But yeah, I can't see him disappearing from Test cricket in the short term unless he's just had enough of it.
True. And I mean, new ball Starc, knockout Starc, both were present at Lords. So he was one of those few Australian players who had a really decent game with both bat and ball. And the guy that we expected to run riot, the fast bowler, in fact, Josh Hazlewood, he ends up with just 2 wickets in the final, a solitary wicket in each innings. And of course, there's that absolute seed, which cleans up Tristan Stubbs through the gate. But I honestly was very underwhelmed by Hazlewood's performance.
Yeah, he's been bowling brilliantly. He probably had a poor game. As I said before, like, okay. Do you know what I mean? It's a one-off game. And he's proved himself over he's proved himself over his whole career, but he certainly proved himself over the last couple of years. So there's no issue there. He was bowling brilliantly, in great rhythm in the IPL. He's come back here. Maybe he a couple of times it looked to me that he was struggling a little bit for rhythm. And again, that's just the thing that happens, isn't it? I mean, it's, I mean, you're doing what newspaper writers do. You're going through every single player to rate them, and it's like, well, sometimes you're gonna have a 0 game. Like that's how life is. Like you're not, if you went through every podcast performance of yourself and me, there would be some podcasts where you'd be lower and some where you'd be higher. Like that's just a natural thing.
Yeah. Your
worry is if you're doing it consistently over a long time. But yeah, I didn't think he was. I thought there was a couple of times where I thought he's just not in great rhythm. When they needed a wicket at the end of the game, though, he was the new ball bowler they gave the ball to straight away, right? Like they were. Pat Cummins wasn't sitting there going that there's a problem with Josh Hazlewood, right? He was very fine with that. So I would take that. That's probably the most important thing.
Yeah, it's not like he didn't get the ball to nibble, and the guy was averaging like 14 or 13 runs per wicket in the entire cycle. But probably the biggest letdown, I suppose, for Australia was Nathan Lyon, especially in the 4th innings where the ball was doing a lot, especially all that vicious turn out of the rough. Wicketless game for him. He's quite old now, and he's a veteran. And I mean, it's not like Australia have tons of people lined up. Like Kuhnemann is around and Todd Murphy is around. At what point do they make that decision to move on from Nathan Lyon? Is that also his decision? Gary's?
Honestly, I thought Nathan Lyon bowled good. I think if you run that innings back, And he bowls the exact same way. He probably takes 2.7 wickets another time. It didn't happen. He was probably bowling from the wrong end, which isn't Cummins' fault, because I think the seamers and the spinners both needed the same end, which is one of those awkward situations where I almost thought Webster should have bowled 15 overs from the other end, where you just rotate your 4 best bowlers from the good end. But I can understand why he didn't want to do that either. Look, there's no reason for Nathan Lyon to not be in the side until Todd Murphy's better than him. You know, like they have to make a call with Todd Murphy and decide if that's the way that they want to go. Right at the moment, that isn't. I don't think that's where we are. So unless they think that Todd Murphy is better, why would you get rid of Lyon? I mean, you know, Kuhneman is not really. I don't think Kuhneman's an all-surface bowler. At the moment, and certainly not from looking at his Shield career. I think Murphy could be, so there's certainly something within that with Todd Murphy. He's still, what would Todd Murphy be, 24, 25? I don't think he's very old anyway.
Yeah, he can be.
Yeah. Last year in Shield cricket, he played 10 matches. Todd Murphy took 22 wickets at 40. Is that better than what Lyon would have done? Probably not.
Yeah,
I mean, definitely
not. Yeah, no, that's fair. And coming to the batters once again, I personally feel one of the more underrated performers for Australia in this match was Alex Carey. Was looking really good in his first innings, and then he, you know, when he was on 23, he attempts that reverse sweep and is cleaned up by Keshav Maharaj. And that counter-attacking 43 or 50 in the third innings is actually really, really key, right? It's one half of that vital 61-run partnership with Stark. And Alex Carey is someone whose trajectory I've noticed has slightly increased over the last couple of years, ever since he took that dip in the Karachi pool, I suppose. So he seems to be a sure shot lock for the entire cycle, but then you've got Josh Inglis banging on the door as well. So that's a really good problem to have for Australia looking at the next 2 years.
Yeah, it's a shame one of them is not slightly better with the bat.
Yeah,
and or gives them more flexibility. Because so the problem with Inglis is I don't think he's ever batted higher than 6 in first class cricket. So I'm not saying he would bat 3, but he would actually allow them to move their batting order around a little bit. Because then you could actually play if they want to use him at 6 and they think he's good enough. And I think honestly, I think they've been waiting for Carey to fail to bring Inglis in, and it's just Carey just keeps playing important innings. He hasn't averaged a lot, but he just keeps playing important innings, and I think they feel like it would be wrong to get rid of him. But the perfect lineup for this is, if Smith has to bat at 3, Smith, Green, Head, Inglis, Webster. Right? Now you've got 2 all-rounders in the side.
True.
And Inglis should be good enough to bat at number 6 in Test cricket. And then you've got Webster at 7, right? Like you've now got you know, an incredible depth there. And you know, I'm just having a look. In first class cricket, he's played 12 matches, batting at 3. He's averaged he's played 21 innings batting at number 6 in first class cricket, Inglis, and he averages 50 when doing it.
Yeah.
I think you can make the claim that he's probably got a higher top end than Webster. Then Webster is more your Andrew McDonald or Colin de Grandhomme type player, right? Where he's just added. And if Webster averages 34 or 35 at number 7 and can bowl spin and medium pace, and Inglis is averaging 40 at number 6, that's a good side, right? That's a really, really good side. So yeah, I think they'll be having a look at that. The problem is that with Carey, it doesn't quite translate in the same way. With Carey, I know Webster's made a lot of runs so far, but I think people are going to work out how to get him out of LBW. Now, you know, we were joking in our chat that it's incredible that he hadn't been out LBW, and then of course it started to happen, right? But if he averages 35, Webster, I wouldn't be shocked at that. You know, even low 30s with the variations that it gives you. You know, tall, nagging seam when you need that, and your secondary spinner when you need that. Like that gives. So the problem with Carey is not himself. It's just that it works slightly better if Inglis is at 6 and Webster is at 7, than Webster at 6 and Carey at 7.
And in this combination, you have Smith at 3, Cam Green at 4, and Head at 5.
Yeah.
Okay,
If that's how they want to force that list.
Yeah, I suppose so. Speaking of,
I mean,
Bo
they might
Webster,
not put Smith at 3, as I said. That might not happen.
Yes.
But I'm just saying you can do that with this, and that it gives you a lot more dynamism. If Smith can do the job, that's fine.
I mean, if he was opening the batting not too long ago and happy doing it, then I don't think that's a big concern. But then I understand the flip side where Australia, like, he's our best batter. We don't want to move him around from 4.
Yeah.
But You mentioned Bo Webster and how he finally got out LBW in his second dig. His first innings is one of the weirdest knocks I've seen in recent times. Is LBW on 8, that's a non-review, ends up scoring 72. Looks streaky as fuck. He looks like a walking wicket versus Kagiso Rabada, really. Like, I don't know how he survives that spell, but credit to him that he does, and he cashes in on width and pulls the ball on occasion. And I and you and everyone on our chat was absolutely flabbergasted when we saw that he has a control percentage of 82%. Shocking.
Yeah, I think it was just the mistakes that he made were really, really close to being wickets a lot of the time. I think sometimes we forget that you can have a control percentage of like 84, but maybe you're slashing the ball and there's no one on the offside and you're not in control of it, but you're not going to be caught. And I think in his case, it was basically half LBW shouts or almost chopping the ball back onto his stumps over and over again, right? So they were a lot more dramatic than than you would normally see in that situation. But yeah, there was quite a few players in the first 2 innings of this match that the longer they batted, the worse they looked. Yeah. He wasn't quite in that camp, but if he'd made 15, I don't think anyone would have remembered how bad he had looked. It would have just been another guy who failed. Whereas because he almost dropped on 5 times and should have been out LBW and almost was out LBW, it meant that we kind of remembered it differently. But sometimes those things happen.
Yeah. And I mean, look, you've got to give credit to him for surviving as well, because that's kind of what Test cricket is all about. And I actually quite enjoy him. I know that he looks really suspect when the ball is bowled to the stumps, but he's phenomenal square at the wicket, very slappy sort of player. And there was this one cover drive he played on the up, which was like, I was like, all right, Bo Webster, I see you. So I feel like he could be a very crucial cog, maybe even if he's not a first string team player out and out, and he's used, horses for courses sort of way. I think that could still really work out well. And he's a guy who's played 100 first-class matches before making his Australian debut in Test cricket. So that goes on to tell you a few things.
Is he the good version of Fahim Ashraf?
Maybe he is. Although Fahim, I suppose, I haven't seen Webster bowl all that much. But Fahim in the middle, where he would get surfaces which were slightly conducive towards pace bowling, he would have really good control, right?
Yeah. But he was pretty useless outside of that, right? So if you think I think his best ball is certainly better than Webster's best ball, right? Yeah. But Webster, because he's 6'19", can control. Webster can play the Jacob Oram role in this side, and then he can play, I was going to say Joe Root, but it's probably slightly different than Joe Root. He can play that sort of really good secondary spin out role, right? So that means he can bowl on flat wickets, and he can bowl when they seam, and he can bowl when they bounce, and he can bowl when they spin. Whereas Ashraf, if you got him a wicket that nibbled around a little bit, he was fine. Yes. But on every other wicket, he wasn't. And Ashraf's batting wasn't anywhere near as good as Bo Webster's, right? Bo Webster is clearly a gear up on batting. I don't think I still think Bo Webster's a 7, but I think Ashraf was probably. Yeah. I think Ashraf was probably an 8 in Test cricket. I know he made. I'm just having a look at his numbers now. So in 27 innings, he made 450s and averaged 26. So he's either a low end 7 or a high end 8, whereas Webster's probably a low end 6 or a high end 7.
I feel like Fahim Ashraf would give you those clutch knocks every now and then, but then on surfaces which would turn, he would just not look good at all with the ball and with the bat, whereas Webster is more versatile. So I do agree that he is a more useful asset for any team. And of course, saving the best for last, Steve Smith. He isn't the top scorer in the first innings. Webster is with 72, but Steve Smith with his 76, for me, was the best batter for Australia in this game.
66 or 76, did you say?
It was 66. And he comes out to bat when Australia are 2 down for 16 and the conditions were terrible to bat, right? The ball is nibbling around like crazy. So we need to take that into account. We also need to talk about his Lords record. No overseas batter has scored more runs at Lords. And after he scores that 50, he has 550 plus scores in his last 6 innings at Lords. Again, makes use of all the width with his punchy shots, and he's slashing hard. And of course, I feel, is very, very necessary for Australia in this upcoming cycle. I know that we were both talking about him potentially retiring, but I don't see a world in which Australia will let him retire, at least for the next 2 years.
I mean, that's not how the retirement works. So
they could convince him, right? Because they really need him, either at 3 or 4.
I mean, if he thinks he's done, he's done, and if he doesn't think he's done, he'll continue on. I thought he was the only player who handled that wicket well when the ball was moving in the entire game. It was a little bit different when it got still. Obviously, we had Stark and Markram and Bavuma, but Bavuma twice. Bavuma got the best batting conditions in this game, I think.
Yeah.
Smith, I just thought was magnificent when it was troubling, and it was a fluke wicket, maybe one of the biggest fluke wickets of all time. It was a fluke wicket and a fluke catch. It was like a double fluke, that one.
It was
and then I thought he was batting well in the second innings. Yeah.
Yes.
I thought he was batting well in the second innings as well. So, no, he looks magnificent. I was a bit surprised when Ed Cowan said he was on the verge of retiring, or he could retire, or however it was that Eddie phrased that. Partly because I watched him in the nets, and he just didn't look like someone who was... I don't want to say phoning it in, because that's the wrong way. He looked like someone who was still working on stuff. And if he's still working on stuff, I kind of feel like he's going to keep playing. That's why I look at that anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, I certainly feel that Australia need him, and it is, of course, his decision moving on. Plus, I also believe that when he does mangle his finger and he goes off, not only do Australia lose one of their best slip fielders of all time, but they lose the tactical nous of someone who's a part of the leadership group and who Pat Cummins goes to, when he's a bit confused.
Yeah,
anyway.
I heard a couple of people say that. Honestly, they've got Hazelwood, Stark, Carey, Head, Khawaja on that field. I'd be less worried about that. I think we talked about it yesterday. I thought Cummins rotated through plans pretty regularly. They just didn't work.
Yeah, fair. Anyway, we've got a super chat from Walking Alive who says, not the biggest fan of some Aussie fans and journos talking about the toss and conditions being a factor when the biggest reason they won the T20 or 2021 T20 World Cup and 2023 World Cup final was due to the toss. I mean, these things are always still important. And a lot of people talk about the 2021 one, right?
Yeah, I don't think the toss mattered that much here. Because it probably did. Actually, think about it. If South Africa had batted first, maybe they get bowled out for 120, 130, and maybe Australia capitalize.
They also get bowled out for that much in the second innings.
Yeah, and then perhaps they go on to and then Australia perhaps go on to score 220 and the game's over. But Walking Alive, if you are looking for losers to be gracious, then sport is not the place for you. This is what losers do. They look for reasons why they lost and they complain. If you could show me a particular cricket culture where that's never happened, I would be amazed to see it. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm very unworried about what the losing fans say when they lose a game, right? As far as the press going, that's probably right. I think that there is an argument in that. But the biggest factor really is that they can't bat Australia. That's the reason. Yeah. If someone had batted with Smith or Webster for a little bit longer, they would have gone on and put a score up that South Africa would never have got close to. If they just batted normally on day two, and I just mean normally, not even well, they would have put themselves into a situation where they would have been batting on day three, which was clearly the best batting conditions in the game, right?
True.
So if they'd done that and then South Africa had to bat on day four, it's over. So yeah, Australia, their batting is still better than South Africa's, and I think they probably proved that in the first innings. But they weren't far enough ahead in the game, and that when they collapsed again, we talked about this yesterday. After the game, Damien Fleming just coming up to me and just being like, "This batting is terrible," and it happens again and again, right? That's the reason they lost this match. But yeah, the toss goes against you. That's what happens in cricket. I just wouldn't worry about.
Yeah.
I don't know why you're worried about that Walking Alive. I paid no attention to it, and I live a happier life.
Look, South Africa played the better cricket. That's why they won. But also, they did get the better bowling and batting conditions. That's also true. Both those things can coincide, I feel. But anyway, just before we wrap this up, Jared, I just have one last question for you. We've kind of, touched upon how Australia have an aging squad and what their team might shape up like in this next cycle. And the bowlers might not change all too much. We might see the same blokes, right? And we kind of figure out a mechanism for how they can operate from positions 3 to 7. So does that mean that the opening batter conundrum is Australia's biggest issue right now, as far as Test cricket goes?
I think the whole top three is, isn't it? I mean, that's why I'm talking about Smith, isn't it? It's in a situation like that, they don't have in the next year, someone they know is definitely going to be in their top 3 the whole time. Like, I know what McDonald just said about Khawaja, and I kind of get his point. But Khawaja might be going halfway through the Ashes, right? Like, if Khawaja doesn't make runs against the West Indies and then also struggles against in the first few tests, he's not going to play. Marnus is obviously being on the verge of being dropped. And I'm not saying they won't try Green again, but they certainly can't be sure that Green's going to be a number 3. Green doesn't know that. I wouldn't be too worried about Green failing in this one because he failed so quickly in both innings. It's almost, I almost wouldn't count this as a failure. Like I'd be more worried if he did what VR Mulder did in the first innings, where you just like the longer he batted, you were like, this is tough, even though he batted well in the second innings.
Plus, he'll get to bowl again come Australian summer, right? Come the Ashes, so that's going to be big for
So
him.
there'll be a few. Yeah, so again, you might not want him at 3 for that either.
Yes.
So look, I think that the issue is that they don't know who their top 3 is. And so one of Smith or Head or Green is probably going to have to bat in that position, which means they might lose some of their impact as well, right? So in any direction that you look, there's a big question for Australia at the moment.
Yeah, and then they'll have to look at their Renshaws and Bancrofts and Marcus Harrises and who knows, Sam Constas. Anyway, one final super chat to end the show. It's from Abhinav Verma. He says, how do you play the wobble ball? Is it that impossible as players are making it out to be?
So the wobble ball is the first ball that seam bowlers have ever had where bowled LBW and caught behind and caught slips all in play at the same time, right? So if you think about the outswinger, it is very hard to bowl an outswinger pitching on middle and leg stump that is going to take off stump and get an LBW and everything else. Because generally what happens is when you try and bowl that ball, it sort of slides down the leg side and you lose it a little bit, right? So that's the main problem that we have. And it's not just that the wobble ball exists. It is a combination of bowlers started bowling the ball, pitching the ball up more because of DRS. The ball has been reinforced. The kookaburra has been reinforced a little bit as well. And so you've got 2 or 3 different factors all playing at the same time that are coming in here. It's not impossible to play, but it is a very, very tough delivery to be able to handle over a long period of time, because what happens with a traditional seaming delivery is that the seam gets banged down, right, quite quickly. So it's really tough for maybe 10 to 15 overs, and then the seam is gone. The wobble ball doesn't always hit the seam, so it means that the seam stays relevant much longer into the innings. And so there are obviously ways to play it, and there are players who have played it, so it would be a lie to say that it is impossible to play, but they haven't worked out how to play it yet. And it's not the first delivery we've ever had. Obviously, when the Doosra first came in, that was a big problem for batters. If you go back to the Rongan, we have had deliveries before that have affected batting, right, around the world. The difference here is that a Doosra and a Rongan, you're probably only going to have 1 or 2 bowlers in the side doing it. For the wobble ball, you might have 4, right? Yeah. And so it's very hard to get away from it. And because the other big difference with the wobble ball, which we're now seeing with spinners as well, is in the old days, we were all taught to keep the seam upright when we bowled spin to make sure that we would get more drift and the ball would land on the seam and spin more. But it turns out that batters can pick that. Once you start scrambling up the seam, it is very hard to tell if you're just doing a little bit of spin or a lot of spin, right? And so it's the same with the wobble ball. So part of the reason that you would need to look at is what we've already seen with batters, which is coming down the crease, right? So that's the thing that the wobble ball is very susceptible to, because you have to bowl it so full. So the ability to bat 2 meters out of your crease, or do what some of the other batters around the Ollie Pope and Daryl Mitchell do, which is that sort of half step down, right? Or full step down in some cases, in Ollie Pope's case, means you can upset the length. That's why Scotty Boland struggled against England. Yeah. That isn't, the problem there is you can't really do that against Unrick Norkia, right? It's harder to do against Pat Cummins. It's very hard to do against Rabada. So it's not as if there is a perfect answer for it, but there wasn't a perfect answer for it when Sean Pollock was bowling it, when Muhammad Asif was bowling it, when Stuart Clark was bowling it, when Courtney Walsh has, what, 1,500 or 1,900 first-class wickets at an average of 21, right? Yeah. People had 20 years to work it out, and they didn't.
Also, I mean, you don't know which way it'll seem as a bowler, so it's obviously going to be tough for a batter, right?
And the other thing is that when it first came in, it was actually quite one-dimensional. It was like, so Jimmy Anderson struggled to swing the ball anymore. Now bowlers are realizing that they can go between, Don't know what happened there. Now bowlers are working out that they can go between things, and they're working out how to go back to swing. So there was a couple of times in this game where Cummins went back to bowling traditional swing, and William Mulder might have done the same thing a couple of times as well. That wasn't happening. So now, if you start to target the wobble ball, people can go back towards traditional seam. The other thing is that with the 3/4 seam delivery, you can control a little bit which direction it goes in. So again, Bayram's right with the sort of the normal wobble ball, but then you have this other one where you can do it. So again, it's getting more high tech, and so the batters are. I think the batters kind of started to work out the very basic wobble ball, and then the bowlers changed it a little bit more. So you know, there isn't a perfect example. I think the best way that I would say is, and I spent a lot of time talking to a lot of batters about this, is you should be trying to hit the ball straight back to the bowler or to mid-on, because that's the angle that it's coming in on. And if it moves the other way, chances are it's not going to hit your off stump very often, and you're probably going to miss it outside the line. But that's a really hard thing to reprogram your batting on. But what happens is, if you look at the sort of, who would be a good example of this, that's sort of a player who's really good off their pads, like Rohit Sharma. They naturally they see the ball's coming at leg stump, and they start to go into that shot. And if it straightens at all, they're in completely the wrong situation. And it's very hard to retrain yourself when you've been playing the same way for 25 years. And that's part of the problems that people are having with it at the moment.
Yep. And with that wobble seam masterclass, we shall end this live now. Thank you to everyone in the comment section for all of your interactions and your super chats. And yeah, I mean, go enjoy yourselves. Enjoy Father's Day. It's still Sunday, and we'll be back soon enough. You can go to goodareas.co, and that you can bookmark that webpage. That can prove to be a one-stop shop for all the fun work that we do as part of this team, whether it be videos, podcasts, or written content. And yeah, we'll see you soon enough. Have a good one, guys, and goodbye.
Ross Taylor couldn't see at night or when the clouds were in. Eventually, he had to see an eye specialist who would fix his eyesight. In the 2 years before the change, he still averaged more than 50 in international cricket. The top level of batting talent can basically see in the dark. That is who we are talking about in our new book, The Art of Batting. Head over and order your copy today.